Today's story is definitely not a well-known missing person case. There is an added twist to it that we normally don't hear about in disappearances. Plus, I'm going to present to you a possible ending to this mystery that you are going to find surprising. In doing this, we will also talk about a 42-year-old case of an unidentified man that may or may not have a connection to this case. First, let's talk about James Thomas Cole. I first learned about this strange case by reading an article written by Alexandria Dugan of the Idaho Press in March of 2022. I was also able to find several articles about Cole's case in old newspapers from Idaho, so they helped to tell the story. This story starts out normal enough. James Thomas Cole was a 24-year-old married father who lived in Boise, Idaho. He had worked at Mountain States Wholesale since 1970 when he was a senior at Bora High School. By all accounts, Cole was a good employee and was well liked by his coworkers. However, what would happen in August of 1976 would surprise everyone who knew him. James Cole worked as a night shift supervisor at Mountain States. Work was going on as normal on August 12, 1976. Cole had reportedly driven a semi to Boise Fruit and Produce Company around 4:10 a.m. that morning. He would then normally walk the 4 blocks back to the warehouse. Strangely enough, about 4:30 a.m., a coworker of Cole's would get a bizarre phone call. Gary Onjastegi was a 25-year-old coworker of Cole's at Mountain States. He said that on August 12 at 4:30 a.m., he received a phone call from an unlisted number with a jovial-sounding man requesting a $200,000 ransom for James Thomas Cole's safe return. Onjastegi at first thought it was a joke. He soon phoned night supervisor Ivan Edney to see if Cole was still there. He learned that he had never arrived back after his trip to the produce company and had been gone an hour. It appeared that James Thomas Cole had actually been kidnapped. Mountain States would apparently wait until 8 a.m. to phone the police to report the kidnapping. Newspapers state that this may have been because the company had received several bogus bomb threat calls recently. The police did arrive after being notified and began an investigation. Also, Mountain States' parent company, Albertsons Food Centers, were notified around 9 a.m. that morning at a board of directors meeting. Upset and fearing for the safety of their employee, they did collect the money and were willing to pay the ransom. As the police were just beginning their investigation, they received a surprising phone call around 5 a.m. on August 13th, about 24 hours after the abduction, from James Thomas Cole. It was Cole himself, and he said that he had been abducted while walking back to the warehouse from his delivery to the produce company. He said he had been drugged and was taken to Mission Manor Apartments in Nampa, about 20 minutes from Boise. He said that police had arrived at the building that day for a complaint of someone being drunk and disorderly. He claimed the police presence had spooked his captors, so they drugged him, zipped him up in a sleeping bag, and fled. He then ran 3 blocks to the Nampa Chief Motel and phoned police. Cole's harrowing kidnapping ordeal was now over. Police arrived at the scene of the apartments where Cole said he was taken. They did find a red Honda motorcycle at the scene, as well as a few items in the apartment that his captors had left behind, including a new TV and motorcycle helmet. Cole had said the initial vehicle that abducted him was a 1972 turquoise pickup truck with a white camper shell. Strangely enough, that description matched Cole's own pickup truck. When police found the motorcycle, they checked who it belonged to. They were surprised to find out it had been purchased the day before the abduction. What was more surprising was the title paperwork for the motorcycle stated the owner was actually Gary Onjastegi. He was the co-worker of Cole's who received the ransom call. Even though Onjastegi was adamant he had not purchased a motorcycle, the owner of the shop insists, in an early newspaper article, he was the one who purchased it and Cole was actually with him at the time. However, 2 employees of the motorcycle shop are said to have picked Cole out of a lineup as the one who purchased the motorcycle. Around the same time of the abduction of Cole, it seems that Albertson Food Centers, parent company of Mountain States, had reported to police that money was missing from the warehouse safe. In some articles, it seemed the management of the company wasn't sure if the money was actually taken or just a mix-up. However, it appears that both Cole and Anjastegi had access to that particular safe. Police were now forced to investigate the victim. During the investigation, Cole and Anjastegi were both given the week off with pay. Given the fact that the abductor's vehicle matched Cole's, the motorcycle purchased, and apartment rented a few days before the abduction, and money stolen from the company's safe, it seemed more and more possible that the kidnapping story was made up. Police had given Cole and Anjastegi both polygraphs, and both showed deception in some areas. 6 days after the APB was issued for the 2 abductors, it was canceled. James Thomas Cole's kidnapping tale was falling apart. It isn't known what all information was obtained by the police, but on August 18, 1976, James Thomas Cole was arrested. He was charged with 1 count each of attempted extortion, embezzlement, and forgery. The attempted extortion was the ransom demand. Embezzlement was theft of $1,696.68 from the warehouse safe, and forgery was purchasing a motorcycle in his co-worker's name. Police did state that there was no actual evidence that Gary Anjastegi was involved in the hoax. Cole paid $1,500 bail and was released pending trial. James Cole did initially plead not guilty to all 3 charges. However, he would eventually plead guilty to 1 charge of attempted extortion, with the other charges being dropped. Cole still stated that he was kidnapped and blocked details of the incident from his mind. In August of 1977, Judge Robert Rowett would sentence Cole to 3 years in prison and a $3,000 fine, and then suspended all but 30 days in jail. He was also ordered to take a tour of state prison. After sentencing, James Cole would fade from the news. However, we have since learned a few details of what happened in 1978 that proved to be even more bizarre than the supposed kidnapping in 1976. It is unclear where James Cole worked in March of 1978, and I could find absolutely no newspaper articles about this incident, so details are vague. According to Cole, he was contacted by someone who claimed to have details about the 1976 kidnapping and possibly who was responsible. He had arranged to meet with this person. On March 13, 1978, Cole was said to have been seen at the place where he was to meet with the informant. It doesn't specify where the meeting point was. After being spotted at the prearranged location by coworkers, James Thomas Cole was never seen again. It is uncertain if he was ever even reported missing this time. However, his truck was later found at the Boise airport, but Cole had vanished into thin air. Cole isn't listed in any missing person databases, so the circumstances around his second disappearance are even more bizarre than the first short-lived disappearance. It is unknown what type of motive Cole would have to disappear on purpose, as he left behind a wife and young son. However, his car being found at the airport makes his disappearance seem possible that it was planned by Cole. Another fact that might lead to his departure being planned was a $25,000 life insurance policy he had taken out on February 4, 1978, shortly over a month before he disappeared. Cole's wife Sandra did try to collect on his life insurance policy soon after his disappearance. The insurance company refused, stating there was no proof of death. Sandra continued to pay the premiums and in 7 years had him declared legally dead and was able to obtain the proceeds from the life insurance along with attorney fees. She remarried and moved to Washington to start a new life. Okay, now we're going to talk about another mysterious case from Boise, Idaho. This was featured on Unsolved Mysteries in 1990. On December 4th, 1982, an unknown man walked into the Sacred Heart Church in Boise, Idaho. He appeared to want to use the confessional, but it was occupied. As preparations began for 6 p.m. Mass that night, parishioner Grace Lieburn was horrified to find a man lying under a pew. They soon realized the man was dead. Police were then called. No one recognized the man who had died at the church. He was a younger man dressed in Western-style attire with the belt buckle displaying a Mexican peso in the center. He also carried a worn wallet, which had seemed to be normally full, but at this time only carried $1,900 in cash and a typewritten note. The note read, "In the event of my death, the enclosed currency should give more than adequate compensation for my funeral or disposal, prefer to be cremated, expenditures. What is left over, please take this as a contribution to this church. God will see to your honesty in this." The note was signed William L. Toomey. No record of that person could be found, and police believe it was a made-up name. There was a company from Boston that manufactured ceremonial garb for priests with the same name. Another surprise came when the autopsy was completed for the mystery man. He did not die of natural causes, but had taken his own life with a fatal dose of cyanide. The police were mystified about who this man was. By his tanned appearance, they speculated he was from a warm, sunny state, and he wasn't known by anyone they talked to. Since no relatives could be located, the church did bury the mystery man. They were unable to cremate him until relatives could be located. More than 150 people attended the funeral mass, where Reverend Faucher stated, "He came to us to die. We don't know who he is, but we come here in faith to pray for him, whoever he may be, and to pray for ourselves." Okay, now for the reason I chose to talk about both of these cases. As I mentioned prior, after reading the article entitled "The Man Who Disappeared Twice" by Alexandria Dugan in the Idaho Press, there was something at the end that really caught my attention. It seems that an anonymous letter was sent to the Idaho Press in 2021. The letter was initially about the unidentified man who died in the church. The mystery writer brought forth a shocking possibility. Part of the letter read, "This man may be James Thomas Cole, who went missing in 1978. Compare his picture to that of William Toomey and compare the resemblance." Could it be possible? I have no proof or law enforcement comment about this shocking possibility. I'm not even sure if law enforcement has looked into it. But let us look at the similarities. James Thomas Cole went missing for the last time in 1978. No trace of him has ever been found. The man died in the church 4 years after Cole went missing. Cole did go missing from Boise, Idaho, which was where the man chose to end his life. James Cole would have been 30 in 1982, and the dead man was guessed to have been between 35 and 45. Also, the resemblance between the composite sketch of the deceased man and the pic of James Thomas Cole is pretty remarkable. I did not post the actual picture of the dead body in my original article, as it is disturbing, but if you will search the Doe Network page for number 3314 UMID, under the photos you can click on a hyperlink to view a post-mortem photo of the man. I also wanted to talk about another missing person who is mentioned on the internet as another possibility of who could be the true identity of William Toomey. We'll talk a bit about his disappearance first. His name is James Edward Lewis. He lived in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He left his home on October 3rd, 1982 in his white Ford Fiesta, telling his family he was headed to Vero Beach, Florida to interview for a job ferrying Piper airplanes from dealers to buyers. Lewis was a recently retired major in the U.S. Army. He had a distinguished career in the military, serving 25 years. He was an Army Ranger and a founding member of the Golden Knights U.S. Army parachute team. He was wounded in Vietnam and highly decorated for his service there. He was a skilled pilot as well as a devoted husband and father. When traveling away from home, he would normally check in with his wife by phone. However, when he left on October 3rd, he would have no further contact with his family or anyone who knew him. In January of 1983, 3 months after James Lewis left for his trip, his wife received a surprising call. It was a parking lot attendant at the Fayetteville Municipal Airport. Lewis's Ford Fiesta had been parked at the airport since October 6th, 3 days after he left, and had been accumulating fees. The family would report his car being found to the Fayetteville police, but it appears that the finance company had already repossessed the vehicle before police could investigate. In 1992, there was a report of unknown remains being found in a nearby county. The family would contact the authorities in that county about their missing loved one, but the remains would ultimately be identified, and they were not James Lewis. Soon after, they would have him declared dead, and his remains were never found. So as I said, some people think that James Edward Lewis bears a close resemblance to William Toomey. I do see a facial resemblance, but there are a few things that don't match that we'll talk about. First off, William Toomey was fingerprinted when they were trying to identify him, and there was not a match. Lewis was a military veteran, so undoubtedly his fingerprints would be on file, so it would be easy to match them that way, but there was no match. There is also a 2-inch difference in their heights. Another important fact is that in Lewis' missing person profile, it says he has shrapnel wounds to his chest, shoulders, right forearm, and upper back. There is nothing like that mentioned in the description of William Toomey. Also, Toomey was found deceased in Idaho, and according to Lewis, he was traveling from North Carolina to Florida. I know he could have made up that destination if he was lying to his family about where he was going and what he was going to do, but I did want to mention the discrepancy. As for my thoughts, I do believe that Cole did steal the money from the warehouse safe. I think he staged the kidnapping and ransom demand as a way to get attention off of himself. He got a small prison sentence and was released. However, the second disappearance is much more baffling. We don't know what was going on in his life 2 years later to make him want to disappear. Since I don't believe he was actually kidnapped, I don't believe the story he told before his second disappearance about someone having information. His car found at the Boise airport makes one think he left the area by plane. Of course, the fact that he took out a life insurance policy a little more than a month before his disappearance also seems suspicious. I must say, I think the man in the church really does resemble James Thomas Cole. Perhaps Cole wanted to end his life and his life on the run and wanted to end it all in the town where he had lived most of his life. Perhaps he wanted to stay anonymous so his wife and young son could keep the life insurance payout he assumed that they had received. The only thing that makes me question is that I assume that Cole was fingerprinted when he was arrested. The unknown man was said to have his fingerprints checked against any in the database. However, it was 1982, so advances in fingerprint technology were not what they are in current times. Could these two mysteries be related? Could William Toomey be James Thomas Cole or a still unknown man? Why did Cole disappear the second time? Did he stay on the run for 4 years and then decide to come back to his hometown and end his life anonymously? Or could William Thomas Cole still be out there alive and well? We may never know the answers to these questions. Until we find out the circumstances around why James Cole disappeared the second time, we will never know if he was a victim or vanished. That concludes my podcast on James Thomas Cole. If you enjoyed it, please leave me a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find me on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio under one word, Lost and Found Podcast. I release a new episode every 2 weeks. You can reach me via email at lostandfoundpodcast@yahoo. I now also have a Patreon channel. Last month, I posted a short podcast on the mysterious disappearance of a couple, as well as a full-length podcast profiling 2 disappearances of young women, with one of them being the most bizarre disappearance I have ever heard of. Next month, my Patreon will focus on 2 cases profiled on Unsolved Mysteries. It is listed on Patreon as one word also, Lost and Found Podcast. And remember that cold cases stay cold because their story stops getting told.